Is there a doctor in the house?
Doctor, you have a visitor in the main lobby.
Hello there. Welcome to Talk To The Doc podcast, where we unpack the habits, disciplines, and mindset shifts that leaders need to cut through the noise and show up with clarity. Today's episode explores how identity drives performance, how discipline can become a strategic advantage, and why trust matters more than ever in the age of AI. My guest today will talk about building consistency in a world that's constantly changing and how to find your leadership rhythm kind of amid all this chaos. If you've ever felt overwhelmed or stuck in tactical mode, this conversation is for you. So I'm your host, Steve the Dr. Meek, and the doctor is in. Today, I'd like to welcome Andy Roller. Andy, hi.
Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, you said my name is Andy Roller, and I'm the founder and president of EXPIO, in case that's hard to every once in a while we get that. EXPIO Marketing.
Got it.
And I started the company in 2011 as a social media management agency, and then we pretty quickly became a full-blown digital agency in a year or two. And we do all kinds of marketing strategy and execution of services as an outsourced solution. We've worked with a lot of different companies over the years. The last few years, what we've really specialized in are professionals, so a lot of attorneys or attorney-type areas, private investigation firms, attorneys, accountants, engineers, professionals, that kind of thing, and then also in healthcare, and inside healthcare, primary dental and women's health. So these are all areas that we focus on the most.
Gotcha. A lot of marketing to professionals and the specific needs of their industries.
Correct.
And I guess, did your marketing agency, did you build that fake background behind you? It looks like you're outdoors.
No, it's a real background. So I live most of the time on a 65-foot houseboat on Lake Grapevine here in DFW. And so I'm outside today. It's a little warm, but I work out here on the porch, or I'm here quite a bit. And it's a great place to work from.
Well, it sounds like the life. What time should I show up tonight for dinner?
Well, you know what? On the weekends, any time is good.
Okay.
There's always a lot happening out here, so somebody will be around to host you for sure.
I always say I'm going to get out on the lake a little bit. I used to have a friend that had a boat on, I think it was Azle, and used to visit with him and enjoy kind of that boat life. But nothing better than being the friend of a guy with a boat. So
yeah, that's for sure. It's better to have the friend than it is to be the guy. Yeah.
All right. Well, as we jump right into this, let's go ahead and get into one of the things I like to start off with is the vitals, kind of what's the pulse of your industry. And when I asked you that question, you said that something like 88% of marketers now use AI daily. Talk to me about that. What are they using that for?
Yeah, that statistic is a few months old, so it's probably increased by now. The number of tools that are available is insane. But I think we all see constantly, AI everywhere. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's starting to use it at some level. It's bigger than the internet type of talk. And in the past, when we've had trends around social media or internet or whatever, they've always turned out to be massive paradigm shifts and massive changes. This is probably, I would say, it's not an exaggeration to say that this is the AI is the biggest change that we've ever seen by a lot. And the speed at which it's happening is insane. So yeah, a lot of people using these tools, and it's growing fast every day.
It seems every day there's more innovations to the to the big LLMs, and there's completely new tools that are kind of point based and those kinds of things. Do you give advice to people who are looking for those tools, or are you mainly doing the selection for yourself internally and having to make those decisions?
We use a lot of tools internally, and we're constantly training on tools, looking at tools. But the advice that I give myself and anyone that we work with is mostly centered around remembering who's the boss and who's the leader. It's not AI. It's not ever going to be AI as long as you maintain that mindset. It's a great tool. It's a horrible master. It's a horrible manager. It's a horrible leader. So smart, trained humans have to maintain that leadership position. But the interesting thing is, if you don't maintain that mindset, if you don't learn, if you don't grow, if you don't use it, you will get used by it and replaced by it. That's for sure. So.
Yeah, one of the first presentations that I did on AI to our clients, I titled it, AI is like your drinking buddy. And my whole point out of that was that, when you work with them, kind of help it out, keep it on track, sometimes it can be the most perceptive, helpful, guiding there for you the time that you need it. And then other times it's kind of full of crap. So I've kind of evolved it to where AI is now that intern you're training. But I think you're right about that.
It'll make it up and lie to you every time. So
correct. Yep. All right. The second statistic I asked you about was what I call the heart rate. What performance metrics kind of tell the story for you right now. And you threw out there that AI-driven automation was increasing operational efficiency by 30% across industries. Why do you think that is?
Well, as you can imagine, and you probably see in your, in the IT world, the ability to exponentially increase output using AI. Let's just say in a business that relies on a lot of documents and information, where you can load hundreds of pages of information and get summaries within minutes. Or new automations that deal with AI inside logistics places or product oriented type of business. Like, it's incredible what you can do operationally with it. Now, I still think it's very weak when it comes to sales, when it comes to customer service, and any of that stuff that's automated. I don't think is very good. But the operational side and being able to increase productivity inside of a given business, I think is huge. So anyway, we're seeing that that number rise. Obviously not as much as the number of utilization, because, it takes time to get good at these tools. It takes time to work out all the bugs and figure out the workflow. But as people figure it out, it's speeding things up a lot.
I also think there's kind of the human ambition. You have to have a guy who really knows how to do a particular function. One of my favorite quotes from Edward Demings was, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, then you don't know what you're doing. And so you really need that guy that really understands it before he can operationalize it with AI. And so you have to take that citizen developer, help him acquire that skill and envision what he wants before, it can kind of come to bear.
I agree. And that's exactly what I was saying about leadership and strategy. You can set the tone, set the strategy, communicate what needs to happen. Yeah, that's great.
And then the last thing, what metrics should leaders know about? I think it said that the impact of strategic initiatives in the healthcare industry is that 85% of the leaders are exploring or implementing.
Yeah, again.
Talk to me about the significance of that.
Yeah, and I realize these are heavy. The bulk of our talk is probably not going to be about AI, but when you ask these questions about the statistics, it's hard not to ignore these numbers because they're rising so fast and they're so important. So yeah, in healthcare, which is an area that we work in a lot, you're seeing a lot of AI when it comes to electronic health records, scheduling, integrating appointments, portals on website concierge bots. So a lot of these kinds of things happening in healthcare, and we're involved in a lot of that stuff with some clients. So we're pretty deep in it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think originally why I reached out is I read your article. I think it was like kind of a Father's Day message, and it talked a little bit about metrics and a variety of other things. But what I loved about what you did is you kind of took some concepts to one of my favorite books, Great by Choice, and kind of relayed that to, I guess, kind of a lot of different things. But I guess, how from that book and from your insight, what do you think the challenge is for leadership out of that?
Well, one of the reasons I used that book in conjunction with the Father's Day story, and just to give a recap, the story that I told was early on in business. I bootstrapped the business, started out pretty well, and then immediately hit a dip that most of us do hit when we start a business. And cash flow was really, really tight, and I was starting to question, should I even be doing this? It was really, really hard there for a minute. And so I called my dad, and my dad told me over the phone that night, he's like, I was kind of complaining and telling him, what's going on. And he's like, well, the numbers tell you where you're at, not who you are. And that stuck with me, and that's part of where that identity aspect came in, to separating the numbers, which are very, very important, and they do tell you where you are, from who I am and whether I'm a winner or a loser based on whatever number you're looking at that particular day or time with your business. There's obviously a lot. So that's kind of how that article started off. And then I worked in the three main concepts from Great by Choice, which is a book that kind of reminds me of my dad because it's very dad-like. And so the metaphors that Jim Collins uses in that book are the 20-mile march, which is basically his way of explaining the great companies that were profiled in the book, how they valued consistency, daily consistency over massive pushes or initiatives and then pullbacks based on time. And he gave some great examples in there, but one of them was if you were going to march across the country, you have, person A and person B. Person A every single day gets up, marches 20 miles. If he could go 40, he doesn't. He just does 20 every single day. If it's raining, if it's cold, if it's hot, he does 20. He doesn't sleep in when it's cold and do 40 when it's perfect weather. Person B goes with the weather. Maybe they do 40 miles on a good day or 60 miles on a good day, but the next day it's raining. So they're like, I did 60 yesterday. I'll take it easy today. And they kind of do it like that. And his point was that the companies that show the greatest results over time are the consistent ones that do the 20-mile march every day. So that was that. Again.
And that was actually based on a true story, right?
Correct. Yeah. He told the story. There was a couple different stories, and one of them was about the differences in exploration in Antarctica, reaching there with Sir Edmondson, and I forgot the other guy, but Edmondson was the consistent.
That's funny. That's the only name I always remember Edmondson, but I don't remember the other guy's name. Well, I guess maybe that's why he died, or that's why you don't remember his name, because he died.
Yeah, him and his team. They were marching based on the weather, and they also didn't prepare as well, which is his third point in the book about packing extra oxygen tanks. But so the 20-mile march is about discipline, consistency, just doing it every day, good, bad, whatever, not underdoing it, just doing it every day. And that concept obviously can apply to a whole lot of things. In marketing, it's putting out the content, putting out the emails, the quality of it, of course, is a big deal. The creativity of it. That his second point in the book was to shoot bullets before cannonballs. Again, another very dad-like concept. This is about controlling risk and being creative at a low caliber rate, like a 22, shooting a 22 doesn't cost you much. Once you start hitting the target with the low caliber, then you calculate a cannonball, which is expensive, hard to aim and shoot. But once you're hitting with the low caliber bullets, then you start hitting with the higher caliber bullets, and you go all in. And it's just a way that he explains of creative testing. A/B testing, content testing. In our case, could be in a lab situation, whatever. But anyway, keeping the costs low while you're figuring out what works, and then once you do figure out what works, doubling down on it. And then the third thing is being with the extra oxygen tanks. And he talks about productive paranoia, and that the most productive leaders that we've ever seen are paranoid about their productivity. They don't let up at all when things are going well or coasting along. They get even more paranoid. And more, just a brief summary of the book in case someone hadn't read it.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorites. And Bullets Before Cannonballs definitely speaks to me within our own organization. We think of ourselves as customer zero. We've got to be able to continually experiment, tinker, try and figure out, ways that, what disruptive technology is out there and so forth. But I think for organizations themselves, they've also got to be able to do the same thing, that they've got to run a business every day and be successful, but they also need to carve out, 10 to 20% of their time where they're trying to get better.
I think 20% is a great percentage.
I think the thing that we see is that, all industries are kind of blending together, and the expectation of service is getting so high that we, if we're not getting better, then we're getting worse.
Yeah, you're right. There is no neutral, especially at the pace things are moving now.
Now, as far as the 20% in your own business, what are you doing, or what are you recommending people do to kind of improve themselves, that 20%?
Yeah, that's great. So one of the things that I do is I look at the week. And so, 20% of a week is basically a day, right? So about a day's worth, not all in one day, but I sort of split that 20% of time, growth time, between a leadership meeting that I have with my leadership team once a week. We call those Momentum Mondays. And so we have a leadership meeting on those days. We go over a few key areas. And then part of my encouragement during that meeting is for them to spend the equivalent of about half a day or so during the week, so 3-4 hours at least during the week, testing and learning on new tools, often that I suggest, or often I'll ask them to find some and suggest. And so it's kind of a combination of repeating a lot of things, zoning in on what's most important for our week, individually and collectively as leaders, and then growing the people around us, the team that each of us are leading and learning.
Now, sometimes when I talk to other executives, they'll, and I do a very similar thing or have a very, very similar approach to yours. Obviously, I guess if we're both Jim Collins
Jim Collins
fans,
yeah.
For whatever we are, I'd expect some similarities. But a lot of times I speak with others and they get a little bit overwhelmed, and I try to tell them that they need to stay out of the weeds, and they'll be like, how do I get out of the weeds when the weeds keep emailing me? What's your advice to people on making those decisions and time management?
Man, email's always going to be there. By the time you inbox 0, it's going to be full again. So you turn it off and you focus. Do not disturb on all your notifications and everything else. You block out the time and you keep it no matter what. There's emergencies that come up, but most people do a pretty poor job of defining what an emergency is.
So bringing in some focus time in their calendar.
You just got to carve it out and keep it.
Yeah, there's definitely, what's the phrase? The tyranny of the immediate. There's always things popping up and coming in and just kind of overwhelming us. How do you deal with kind of the information overload?
Well, based on what you were just talking about, I'll give you something that in our culture, we have 3 sort of inverted values, you could call them. So these are things that we don't like, that we don't do, that sort of help inform what we do and what we do like. And one of those is no ASAP. Or I got that from the book Rework, and where he talks about ASAP is poison for cultures. And so one of our values is no ASAP. So that doesn't mean that we don't operate quickly and responsibly. It just means that we bring definition to what's an emergency, what's important, and what's not. And so I'll give you a quick example. The easiest way to do that, and you can do this internally with your team, with each other, or you can do this with clients. And I've trained my team to do both. And that is, let's say a client or a teammate sends you something that they need done, and they say, I need this done ASAP. Well, rather than just taking that at face value, what I've trained my team to do and what I do is, okay, I understand what you need. When exactly do you need this done? And 99% of the time, it's next Tuesday, or it's end of the day, or it's tomorrow. It's not ASAP. It's not an emergency most of the time.
It sounds like it's, I want to mark this off of my to-do list so I don't have to think about it. And then you need to put it on your to-do list. So then I feel like it's taken care of.
Yeah. It's like someone asking for a proposal on a Friday at, 4:59, and they need it ASAP. You're like, you're not even going to look at this until you get back to work after the weekend. You don't need this ASAP.
Now, do you do anything to go back and look at the request and kind of, at that point, you're potentially shutting it down, but do you do anything to kind of help the person rethink of why, what could they have done to prevent it becoming an ASAP request? Could there be better planning, a different system, a specific process? Do you do anything like that?
With my team internally, absolutely. Because I have the ability to speak to that to whatever degree I want. So yes, with a client, you have to be careful. It depends on the client and their tolerance for pushback. And, we try to lead our clients any and everywhere we can. I tell one thing that I tell my team a lot is that we are guides, not vendors. So don't let yourself be treated like a vendor. And that requires sometimes pushing back on clients and challenging them. So, but that's a delicate dance that you have to be careful with.
We like to say we co-create with our clients. It can't be just them. There's I think like you said, it's almost kind of a dance that, we've got to each do our part, and it's going to be way more beautiful if we do it together the right way. So
try to stay off each other's toes.
Right, exactly. I'm liking how this is all developing. It's all coming together really well visually.
Yeah, but also if we're talking dancing, somebody has to lead that dance.
That's right. So in your efforts, how do you exert that force controlling the dance, but also soliciting and inviting in your client for your marketing to really reflect who they are, because professionals are all, you can have 20 different physicians, like myself as a fake physician. You could have 21 physicians, but 21 physicians, how do you steer and how do you invite in that personality of the individual into the marketing?
Well, there are whole books written on that topic, but I'll give you the shortest answer that I can. And I think that is being a master at asking the right questions. I think that's how you ask your way into the insights that you need them to have.
That's kind of the whole point or structure of the podcast is, and why part of the reason I ended up with the doctor moniker is, when I watch what happened at a physician before they make any recommendations, they take their vitals, they ask for some background, they have some conversation with you, maybe they run some additional tests, and then they make their observation or recommendations. And just being in the IT industry for so long, I would learn that there would be people who were really good at firewalls. So every time there's an issue, it seemed that the answer was, hey, you need a new firewall or you need a new server, whatever the technology happened to be. And it was kind of putting the cart before the horse on recommendations. Technologists recommended what they knew or what they understood and less asked about what the client was after doing or what the goal was and stuff. And so that's kind of a little short history of the whole doctor name within.
Yeah, and you've probably found yourself many times having to watch the tendency because you'd seen a pattern so many times to go through the discipline of actually doing the analysis and the testing, even though you're like, oh my gosh, I've seen this 100 times. This is what it is. That's tempting to do, right? When you know what you're doing, but you still need to go through with the process to make sure.
Yeah, definitely. Over time, as we become experts, we develop cognitive biases where our mind tries to limit us to those most frequent answers and says, hey, this is supplemental anecdotal information. You don't really need to know that. And I find that as a consultant, I have to completely fight against that a lot.
Yeah.
That when somebody starts to explain things, you also have to remember how the brain works. And if I'm talking to a non-technical person about a problem, they'll say item 1, they'll say item 2, they'll say item 3, they'll say item 4, but it's actually item 5 that is what's really most important to them. It's just that they mentally have to go through this other chaff in the way to get to what the real heart of the issue is. So I really have to encourage the person to speak more and tell me everything before I decide to go one way or the other, because it is the non-technical mind just kind of spews off information in an unstructured format, which means that the most important piece is usually not at the top. It's somewhere near the bottom.
Yeah. You have to listen and dig for it, right? That's what makes you good at what you do. And in our world, it's usually people confusing tactics with strategy. So what they'll do is they'll come to us, and a lot of times a client will come to us, they'll hire us, and then they'll start to tell us, well, we need you to do email and social media and a website and all this kind of stuff. And of course, we offer all those things. And I'm like, well, you're wanting to hire us, and the most powerful thing we have to offer is strategy, not tactics. We are an outsourced solution for those tactics. But if you just want to come to us and tell us what the tactics are without a strategy, that's a huge waste of your time and money. We'll do it. We have. But wouldn't you rather have a strong strategy and goal and metrics and ideas and ways of iterating over time to figure this out? And yes, that's going to involve some tactics, but how those tactics are deployed are extremely different depending on strategy. So
yeah, you definitely have to understand the context before you can make a recommendation or before you have a solution. So along those lines, what is a strategy opening question that you might ask? If someone was a professional and they needed help with their market, what kind of opening question or one of the top 3 questions that you ask them to get at the heart of that?
Yeah, one of my favorite questions to kind of initially with CXO type owner, director, whatever. And I'm shocked at how many can't answer the question very quickly or just don't know at all. And it's questioners around, okay, I'll ask them what their goals are, projects, things like that. But the key question is, what piece of business, service or product or whatever, what piece of business is the sweet spot for your company in terms of profit margin? And I don't necessarily care about volume, how much you're doing of it. What's the most profitable? What's the thing that can make you the most money that if we amped it up, did more of it, would make you the most and cost you the least? And it's amazing to me how few people can rattle off that answer, because now people's goals can be different and not always business oriented. Sometimes it's just branding and exposure and maybe patient education or whatever. And that's all great. The goals can really differ. But for most businesses that are in it, at the end of the day, to make more profit for themselves and for their people. Not that that's their only goal, but you can't be in business without it. It's amazing to me how many people can't answer that question very effectively. So we try to get to that and use that as one of our initial targets for, okay, well, then this is what we need to educate people on. That's what we need to talk about. So where the messaging needs to go.
And I was among them for a long time. I was a partner in another organization, but I was probably in year 15 of Fulcrum before I came across what's that book? The Pumpkin Plan.
I love that book. Yeah.
Michael Lewitz. Just kind of talking about how the pursuit of revenue versus the pursuit of profitability. And that was really eye-opening for me that instead of just shooting out there trying to hit everybody, find out who is our sweet spot client.
Yeah, that's a great book. And that's exactly, it's that book or a version of that book that's how I approach sales and marketing. It's identify the very specific audience and then lead and never be afraid to fire bad clients. It's always a net positive.
Well, I did have another speaker on here who said that in the challenge of AI for marketers right now is that because so many marketers are able to put out much better content out there or much faster, however you want to think about it, that now even good messages from good marketers have to contend with a lot more similar marketing, those kinds of things. How do you think as an agency, how do you guys deal with that particular situation?
Well, it's about adherence to the fundamentals. It's kind of like the John Wooden rule where he would, every time he had a new basketball class at UCLA, he would offend them all by teaching them how to put on their socks and tie their shoes the right way. And he had all his reasons for that, but that's how he started and everything. And so we're very much that way. And the fundamentals in marketing that most marketers forget, and they certainly don't execute well. The fundamentals are audience, like very specific identification of the audience or audiences, the messaging and the clarity around the messaging, and the alignment from all of that to what the ultimate executive level business goals are. And that sounds so simple. And many people smarter than me have said it. And so few marketing agencies do a good job of executing to those fundamentals and actually taking the time to make sure all of that stuff is absolutely on point. So once you do that, that creates the constraints or the creative constraints that you need to now be able to stand out a little bit. Because it is very noisy. And so it's a signal to noise issue. So the clearer the signal, the more it cuts through the noise.
I love the reference to Wooden. I'm a big, I've got a few sports books over here, business sports relationships, but, I just equate a lot of, kind of the business and corporate life and how we do things to sports. There's just so many similarities, from coaching to discipline to plays to everything else, or even individual performance. There's just so many parallels there to lean into.
Yeah, my favorite coaches John Wooden and Phil Jackson.
Wooden and Rick Carlisle. So it's a very similar vein. But that's because I'm a big Dallas Mavs fan. So
I'm struggling.
I used to have kind of a bromance with Rick Carlisle when I used to do the fantasy camps at AAC. But that's a story for another day.
Yeah.
Now, how do you, when you engage with customers, what things do you do to kind of figure out who's a good client for you? Are there things aside from business?
Rightly or wrongly, we're very relational. Our business has grown 99.9% through referrals and or indirect, relationship type referrals. So it's just been a game of really figuring out who do we want to work with. And what I've learned, and I'm sure you have as well in the IT technology world, is that typically great client fits hang out together. So I try to figure out with our clients, who their most trusted vendors and partners and people are, customers that they like the most, that they do the most business with, that they rely on, that they trust. And I like to get to know those people as well and kind of create tribes around our clients and, create an environment with these other groups that support that client as well. In doing that, often these other support vendors, partners, customers, et cetera, end up becoming clients of ours as well because they see how we treat the client and that we really want the client to succeed. We invest ourselves into their success. We really want to see them win. We're not just another place collecting checks for a bunch of generic, fluffy marketing services. So,
as a Native American, I'm offended by use of the phrase tribe. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, what I want to ask you is when you talk about this tribe aspect, what goes into that for you? What are you really doing there to kind of create that? I love the book Tribes as well, but what are you doing to kind of bring together that sense of a group working together?
Well, and on the Native American side, I grew up in Amarillo, Texas, around Palo Duro Canyon, and was part of the Quahatis organization, and always loved Native American history. And so Geronimo and Crazy Horse were some of my favorite biographies that I ever read. Just love that history. But anyway, Juana Parker is, that's just a few miles away from where I grew up. Anyway, it's a combination of obviously being professional, doing a great job. Like we want to show, results. I'll give you a quick example. We had a client recently that they've been with us for a few months, and they were, just super happy. And we're seeing a direct correlation and uptick to the business that we were marketing and focusing on. And so that became easy to tell that story and ask them would they be willing to share that story with so-and-so. And, hey, I noticed so-and-so. You mind if I give them a call, tell them your story? It seems to be working for you. It just, to me, it's a pretty natural approach. And so we don't automate a lot of our sales stuff. I don't think we automate any of our communications. It's all written by humans. Now we use prompts for AI and messaging and stuff, but we keep everything very human and real. And I think, again, there are plenty of companies out there that are automating everything and somehow just on sheer volume are able to overwhelm the market in a way where this tiny, they put out so much spam that there's this tiny percentage that works. For me, even if I could get that to work or get people to spend that kind of money, that's just not the kind of business I want. It's not fun. And I think it just makes more noise in the world. I don't think it makes the world better. It makes it worse. So
if you're an organization evaluating, kind of a marketer or, kind of trying to figure out how to get the most out of your marketing firm, what advice would you give them, in that, knowing that all firms are a little bit different? Some are going to be volume focused. Some are going to be maybe narrower and, kind of hyper focused in a specific area. What's your advice to them? What questions should they be asking?
Yeah, I would say that most people need to ask their marketing people better questions, and they shouldn't be afraid to challenge what they're seeing on reports and approaches. They should ask questions. And a lot of marketing groups get away with sending very generic reports and metrics. So I'll give you an example. A lot of SEO, for example, the SEO section of report will often focus on traffic and, website traffic. Well, honestly, who cares? Like website traffic is the easiest thing in the world to fake. There's bots. It really doesn't matter what your traffic is. What matters is source of traffic, referral traffic, who's the traffic, where's it coming from, which part's real. It's the breakdown of the quality of who that traffic is. And in some cases, you don't need 100,000 people to visit your website. You just need one right guy or company to do it and use it to land, in some cases, maybe a deal that will pay off your marketing for the next 10 years. I think asking questions around why are we seeing this metric, that metric? Why aren't we seeing this or that? How does this translate? I think this is a great question. So what? Just always say why. So what? Like, how does this translate to what we're trying to accomplish as a business? If the vendor, the marketer, whoever can't answer that question, then it's time to look for a new one.
Yeah. Now, how do you handle that for organizations? I guess in dealing with smaller organizations, I feel like when organizations first start, their whole focus is sales outreach. Yeah. At some point along the way, they start to understand a little bit about all that they're missing in the way of marketing, and all of a sudden kind of leap all over marketing and maybe tune out sales reach a little bit or deprioritize it.
True.
What's your message to organizations? How should they approach things?
Well, sales and marketing have to be in agreement and in alignment, and they need to understand the role that they each play, and both roles are critical. And now maybe this is biased, and I get that, but whether you're talking about external marketing or internal marketing team, marketing has to, in my opinion, lead sales.
Yeah, that's very biased. That is like so biased. I can't tell you.
I know it is, but I think marketing has to lead sales, and sales hates that because sales are like, well, you're not out there getting it done. We're the ones closing the deals. Yeah, true. And it is hard work, and sales is admirable and it's important. And that's why they get paid so much for it. But marketing is, if it's done right, is setting the messaging, the tone, the audience, all of vetting that goes into, sales, like they're out there outreaching. And when that prospect goes back to look and check you out, which they all do, all of that stuff's got to match what sales is talking about. And so sales has to be educated by and informed by marketing, and then take that messaging, stay in alignment with it, and then go out and be the evangelists. And then as they do that, as people are now circling back and looking at the marketing, which would be, website collaterals, articles, whatever, then that's got to all match. And so that's a real important. Anyway, that's kind of how I see generally those two relating.
Now, structurally, after you do what you do with an organization that you're consulting with, how do you, how do you help them bridge that gap with the sales team? What things or tactics or strategies are you doing to engage the sales team to really bring them into working with whatever's going on in marketing?
Well, first of all, you get the backing and support of the executives. They have to be on board with what the plan is. And then you get marketing and sales in the same room, and you basically go over a version of what I just said, and you have to get that agreement and that buy-in so that each side sees why the other side matters. They value what each side brings and which part of the process they're doing, and they understand how they each impact the customer journey at different points. And, sales, and I mean, I'm a sales guy. I've been in sales. I do sales. It's very easy to overestimate our value because we're the tip of the spear when it comes to new business. And so we feel like we did it. We talked to them. We did the contract, the proposal. We got it. We did it. Well, you implemented marketing and you took it to, the prospect, and you were able to implement and use the messaging that was created by marketing. And you've got to be able to appreciate that. And so for some of us as sales guys, that takes a little bit of humility. And also, if you've had the experience of working at odds with a marketing team where they haven't done a good job of the messaging, and then you're having to adjust it yourself as the sales guy because it sucks, that's a very frustrating experience. So you got to fix the marketing there.
I'm sure most organizations have done I used to call it the 30K dump, where you go out and engage some marketing organization with some kind of pitch, and 30K later you feel like you haven't made appreciable progress, kind of thing. But at some point, everyone's done a 30K dump of something.
I've literally done that twice. Yes, yeah, with lead gen groups. I've done it with lead gen groups, and I mean, I did it one time, and I never do this again. I waited about 9 years, and I did it again, and the same terrible result.
I used to tell my business partner that I'm a sucker for a 30K dump. Just give me somebody who looks really smart and sounds like he knows something. And
90 days and 30K, man. 90 days and 30K, and we're going to change your life. It's bullshit.
Now, there was something else I was going to ask. What I was going to ask you is, with the rise of AI, do you feel like marketing metrics have changed, what you look at or the actual numbers you're looking for?
Well, I think they're going to. I think what we're going to see is, if you think it's been noisy up to now, it's just going to get noisier and noisier because there's so much crappy content. I mean, I look at LinkedIn, and I'm a proponent of LinkedIn. I like LinkedIn personally and for clients or professionals. And I mean, there's, people putting out content, including agencies, and they're not even taking the emojis and EM dashes out of their content. I mean, they're just pasting crap in Chat GPT, and they're not even trying to hide it. And so I think, there's a lot of noise there. So what we're going to see as a result of that kind of thing is we're going to see open rates with the email probably go down. We're going to see click rates go down. We're going to see engagement rates on social go down, probably, at least for a while, until people figure out how to beat all the noise, and then maybe it'll start to come back up. But I think overall, every agency is going to be different, of course, but generally speaking, if people see the noise go up, spam go up, effectiveness rates go down.
What about on the flip side, for an organization doing it? Are you incorporating AI more in analyzing the metrics or doing anything special there?
Well, I love AI for so many reasons. I mean, it's a great place to ideate. It's a great place to get feedback, create masterminds. Yeah, getting reports built and analyzed and looked at. It's wonderful for that, as long as you check pretty much every detail, because it's amazing how full of crap AI can be. But so we use that internally, and it's great. The ability to access information so fast and analyze things so fast is phenomenal. I think the biggest challenge is, we had, I don't know what the new age is going to be called. We had the information age. So let's just call that, ever since really before the internet, but for sure with the advent of the internet, we've been in the information age. And that created the problem where we had more information than we could ever use, but no wisdom, no application, right? And so, for all the people that were like, well, human beings are really good, they just need more information. Well, that clearly has been proven false, because there's more information than anybody could ever need. And we're not all billionaires with six packs, right? So with AI, take that dynamic of incredible amount of information that's available, like now more than ever, in the blink of an eye, you can talk to the smartest people alive in their AI form, all of the smartest dead people that ever lived in their AI form, interact with every library. So now we exponentially have this information overwhelm. And so I think the leverage is in the people and groups that don't allow themselves to get overwhelmed by all the things they could be doing or knowing or learning or tools they could be using. And they really, back to our Great by Choice book, they do the 20-mile march. They don't get distracted by all the new toys and systems and information. They pick a few things that they can do really well, and they do them every single day. And I think that's who wins in this age of just anybody can know, build anything.
And I think, one of the things too, you can do a lot of great things with AI, but, AI doesn't replace the personal touch. You still need the human aspect of things. And, I remembered I once hired this sales rep who said that, he kind of mastered cold outreach. And it kind of turned out that it just meant that he's always cold and he's usually reaching, like for snacks or something, not really leads. So you have to have the right people on the team that are reflecting whatever the personality and the culture is of your organization.
Yeah, agree.
Well, as we start to come towards the end of our day, one of the things I always like to do is put together kind of an after visit summary. And we kind of wandered through a lot of different stuff today. I saw over at the Cosm in Dallas, they're doing these, the huge screen versions of the Matrix. So, I'm thinking after our conversation, there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path.
Yeah.
And, for those of our clients and prospects and listeners that are ready to kind of lace up and lead, what's the one insight you'd want to hand them as a compass from our conversation today?
Well, this will sound so, dad-like and Jim Collins-like and whatever, but, the only person in the world that I can control is me. Can't control you. I can influence, I can help, but the only person I can control is me. And so what I have to do every single day is get up, do the things that I think I can do best, that I know, serve the people I can serve, do the things I can do, and not get worried, distracted, or hesitant in the face of overwhelming information, competition, issues, and politics in the news. There is so much that flies into our eyes every day of what's going on like never before. I mean, we all around the world, whatever it is, markets, politics, tragedies. And what I have to do is remember, I can't do anything about 99.999% about that, but I can get up and I can serve my clients. I can serve my team. I can serve myself. I can serve my family. So I'd say these days that matters more.
One of our core values is our first core value is take personal ownership. And, when you say what you just said, it makes me think about, to me, it seems like post-COVID, there's about like 40% more external noise just blasting everybody all day long, whether it's politics or something in the news or something that happened. It just feels like there's this 40% more pressure on everybody that they're dealing with, just trying to figure out how to make it to the day, aside from whatever's going on at work.
So 20-mile march, step at a time, day at a time.
Well, obviously, one of your prescriptions would to be get the book 20-Mile March, maybe Pumpkin Plan. But what other recommendations do you have as prescriptions for people to kind of get to that next level for themselves?
Yeah, since you mentioned the Michael Malkowitz book, Pumpkin Plan, he also has one called Profit Plan, which is one that I read recently. I have not implemented. I've implemented parts of it, but it's actually kind of a full system. I'm considering implementing that in my company. But anyway, I think that's a great book. Rework. I mentioned this earlier in the podcast. It's a great book. Love it. It's older. I mean, for business book in 2011, I think is when he wrote it, but great book. The guys that wrote or that built Basecamp. So let's see, those business book wise, I'd say like just entertainment wise, Dave Grohl's autobiography.
Dave Grohl, okay.
I read that recently. It was fantastic. And Tom Petty's autobiography, also fantastic. Fun fact, Tom tried to hire Dave as his drummer after Dave left Nirvana and before he started Foo Fighters. He did a few shows with Tom Petty, but he never did take the job.
Gotcha. I read a lot of business books, but right now I take a break for biographies as well. And I'm reading Mark Twain's, not his a biography, not his autobiography. I read his autobiography a long time ago, but I came across somebody who wrote a biography, and I got like 4 hours in before I realized it's like a 44-hour book. So I'm like, Ooh. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I started this. And
it'll take you a while to get that one.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit more.
I love
now. I've got a very specific type of audience. They also like free stuff. So do you have any like free things for them that you can share?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk to them for free about what they need marketing wise in there. So we do a free 30-minute consultation. They can find that on our website. We do some free assessments, initial assessments for like SEO.
Okay.
Some things like that. So yeah, they can contact us with that.
And if they were wanting to reach out, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
EXPIO, EXPIO Marketing, EXPIOMarketing.com.
Okay.
We have a free resource on the homepage. It's called the EXPIO Plan. You can download that for free. So back to your pre-question. And then there's a contact form there on the homepage, and you can request an assessment or consultation.
Now that PDF, is it just a document that says marketing leads everything because we're biased, or what kind of stuff are in there?
Yeah, the PDF is, we like to tell stories and use stories on pretty much everything. And so the PDF is about Pip the Penguin and how Pip finds his voice. Pip the Penguin and how Pip finds his voice and how it finds a tribe of followers in the midst of a noisy penguin colony. So the applications are obvious, but our little tagline is be clear, be found, be followed. And Pip is a great example of that. So you can read about Pip.
Any fun stories on how Pip got his name?
Well, my writer, Thomas, came up with the name Pip, and he floated a few names. And I was a little reluctant to do, penguin cartoons, but I was like, you know what, who cares? This entertains me. I really don't care if people like it or not because I like it. So we stuck with Pip, and then I felt like PIP was a good name for lots of acronyms. Like there's power in purpose, or whatever. There's a bunch of them, but anyway, that's where Pip came from.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it definitely will stand out in Texas, especially during the current weather. But we just don't think about penguins that often.
Yeah, maybe I'm just envious of Pip's environment.
Yeah, I'm having a Mr. Popper's Penguins flashback right now as we talk.
Yeah, but I mean, who doesn't like penguins, man? It's been fun too with AI to create little cartoons and visuals with Pip. So why not? In
our branding, we have a dog, Spot, and so with some of the AI stuff, we've been doing more visuals with like a person in clothing, but with a Spot dog head to it, and
it's too fun.
For it really internally. We've got this contest going on, and so we've got like these Spot dogs playing pickleball, because one of our internal contests. It looks so disarming but hilarious.
Yeah, love it.
Well, and as far as myself, you can always reach me by email at the doctor, spelled out, at fulcrumgroup.net. You can reach me on LinkedIn. Go ahead and reach out and mention that you're part of this podcast. I don't link up with everybody, but if you mention that you saw me through here, I'll be glad to link up with you and keep in touch. And that way we can watch each other's feed. And that brings us to the end of our doctor's appointment. How do you feel at the end?
Yeah. I'm great. Thanks, Steve. I appreciate the opportunity to be on the show, and wish you the best with future guests. Hope you continue to grow your audience and see a lot of success from it.
Well, I was excited to have you on, and I think if anything, today's conversation kind of reminded us that kind of that clear leadership and aligned identity. Those are the kinds of things that kind of help inspire trust. You can use AI, and it'll help you with a lot of things, but it's not going to do what you really intend unless you get above the chaff, above the noise, and do other things that are helpful, like, provide great service. But at the Fulcrum Group, our commitment to another one of our core values is inspire client confidence. We work to make sure that shows up in every plan, every project, every person we put in front of you. We're not just about fixing issues, we're kind of trying to build partnerships, a tribe, if you will, as Andy mentioned, and, just kind of focused in that clarity and care. So I hope you enjoyed our topic today. If this episode resonated, be sure to subscribe and share it with someone who also leads with purpose, just like I'm sure you do. I'm your host, Steve the Doctor, Meek, and I'm out. The doctor is out. Thanks, Andy. See y'all next time.